Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to Drawing Down the Stars. I'm Snappy, and thank you all for joining me for our continued live reading of Apuleius's The Golden Ass or Metamorphoses. This has been such a fun and wild read, and I'm so happy to have you guys all here with me, checking it out, digging deep, and getting wild. So let's do a little bit of a recap to where we have been. We just finished book 4. And book 4 was a really wild kind of story. So we begin when we see our man Lucius is now a donkey, right? Turned into a donkey by his own hubris after getting Fotis, the maid, to steal magic ointment from the witch Pamphile. But she stole the wrong ointment, turned him into a donkey. He then, in a course of a ruckus where thieves, brigands, lesties, right, are robbing poor Milo's house, he gets taken and turned into a pack mule. They take all their stolen goods and they load up poor Lucius, and he's whipped up a mountain to the next town over, right? And that's where we found him. And what happens is he starts starving, gets super hungry, and he breaks into a garden and he eats all the vegetables because he doesn't want to eat hay or horse feed. So after he eats all these vegetables, he starts going on the prowl looking for those magical roses, as he was told by Fotis if he could eat a pure rose, that he will turn back to a man. He thinks he sees some roses by this temple to Venus in this grove, and he goes over only to discover that it's not roses, but rose laurels. And he almost poisons himself, but he gets attacked by that gardener whose vegetables he ate, and they beat him half to death. He fights back, prevents himself from getting killed, only to have the thieves take him again, and they continue on their way. And this time, what ends up happening is one of the other donkeys collapses, and poor Lucius gets strapped with most of the goods. Half go to him, half to go to the horse. And the other donkey gets kicked off the side of a cliff to die. So poor Lucian is stuck. He has nowhere to go, and there's no means to escape. So he accompanies the brigands to their lair, and they go into this secret cave entrance. And in the lair, they meet up with this old woman who the guys berate. And Lucius hangs out with the old lady and gets to finally eat again, eating tons and tons of bread. So ridiculous. And while all this is happening, the old woman feeds all of these brigands, even as they treat her just absolutely awfully. And while they're eating, they relay us their tales. Not all the thieves were successful like the group that went to Milo's house. We get the tale of a couple of the other attempts to rob people. And the first one we hear about is one of their leaders, Lamachus. And Lamachus, he spies this rich guy who he believes is basically, this guy is pretending to be poor. He dresses in rags, his house is all dirty and whatnot. He's in a poor area of town, but he's really loaded and he keeps it all locked away in his house. So Lamachus and his band decide that they're going to break into this guy's house to steal what he's got. But when they go to break in, Lamachus sees them and he shoots. The guy whose house they're robbing sees them and he shoots Lamachus right in the hand. And Lamachus's hand gets stuck to the wall of his house. So then the man starts shouting, "Fire, fire, fire," telling all his neighbors. And everyone else starts shouting fire. So now the whole neighborhood is awake and everyone's about to descend on these thieves. So in a panic, they decide they have to cut Lamachus's arm off in order to get out. So they cut his arm off and they run away. But poor Lamachus, he bleeds to death. So they throw him into the ocean. So then the next attempt, they come across this old kind of cottage, really poor, with an old lady inside. And their other leader is this guy, Alcimus. And he decides he's going to rob this poor lady. He's going to rob her blind. He's taken every single thing in the house while she's sleeping and thrown it out the window all into the front yard. Finally, he's taken everything except for her in her bed. So then he tries to wake her up to steal the bed, which he does. But the old lady, feigns being feeble and is like, oh, don't hurt me. And then she says, you're just throwing all that stuff out onto the front yard. My neighbors are greedy and far richer. They're just going to steal all that stuff. So Alcimus panics and he sticks his head out the window to get a good look. And while he's looking out the window, the old lady pushes him out the window. And he falls to his death and dies. Right? So now we have the second of these thief leaders dead. And the brigands throw him in the ocean. And then the final one, we get the story of Thrasyleon and Demochares. So Demochares is this really rich guy who owns gladiators and gladiator fighters. And he has a bunch of wild animals, including bears. And a bunch of his bears get sick and they die. So he's in the market for more bears, right? And he's always he's got all this wealth and he's got all this power and he's flaunting it. He's got this big house. And the brigands figure that if they get one of their guys to dress up like a bear, that he can infiltrate into this house, open the gate, and let all the thieves in. So they decide to do that. And they all draw straws. And this guy Thrasyleon draws the shortest straw, and he has to dress up like this bear. So they dress him up like this bear, and they put him in a cage, and he puts on a good show, and he manages to convince this guy Demochares to buy him, as well as his friends, and they convince them to leave him out in the courtyard and not put him with the other bears. Everything is going well, and then even he manages Thrasyleon in the night to get out of his cage, open the gates even. Everything is going well. The brigands all come inside. But they all underestimated just how freaking powerful and how many men this guy Demochares has. All of a sudden, they're completely surrounded. And the brigands wind up running away. And they watch as their man winds up having to get shot and fight against all of these guards from Demochares. He gets peppered with arrows, stabbed, but he never cries out as a man. He always pretends to be a human. And he puts on such a good show, they all believe it, and they don't bother to check the body until the butcher comes the next morning, giving the brigands time to get away. So they're all super thankful for Thrasyleon pretending to be a bear so well. But their whole attempt to rob failed. So they lost 3 leaders. 3 brigand leaders were killed. But there was one other person who succeeded, and they managed to succeed in kidnapping a mysterious young girl. And at this point, we don't even know her name. We don't know much. But the young girl was sent to go be with the old woman and Lucius. And the old woman tries to comfort this girl who just got kidnapped from her wedding. And the brigands try to comfort her as well. They say, "Oh, we're not going to rape you. We're not going to kill you. We need you. You're good leverage. We're gonna ransom you." Of course, this doesn't do much to make this poor young girl happy. So she's freaking out. The old lady's trying to calm her down, and eventually she falls asleep and she has this horrible nightmare. And this is where we get sort of the vision of what happened to this poor girl, where she had fallen in love with her childhood sweetheart, and both of these families were interested in the arrangement, and it was this love and family arranged marriage. It was like the ideal, everything couldn't have gone more perfect for this young person. And she was set to marry the love of her life with the blessing of her family, all of her friends present, everything coming to fruition, and then brigands show up and ruin everything. And in her dream, after she gets kidnapped, her husband-to-be follows and chases after, only to be killed by the thieves who are annoyed by his relentless pursuit. And so she's panicked and doesn't think that there is going to be any money, is going to be any saviors, and that she's going to eventually get killed and raped by these men when they realize that she's not the prize ticket for ransom that they think she is. So that's where we left off. 3 dead brigands, 3 crazy robbery stories, 1 young girl kidnapped on her wedding day, and 1 Lucius turned into a donkey, stuffing his face on stale bread. All right, so let's hop over now to our story. Here we go. And we are beginning with book 5. Oh, I almost forgot. Sorry. As part of the ending of that story, as a way to comfort the girl, we started getting the story of Cupid and Psyche. And we heard the first half of this story where poor Psyche, she is cursed by being so beautiful that her beauty rivals that of the goddesses, right? And this is a tale that takes place right after, the War of Troy and the whole debacle with the apple, where Aphrodite was chosen as the most beautiful, right? So, but for whatever reason, Psyche, this young, real person, this young girl, no more than 15, is so beautiful that people think she's a goddess. People go crazy and are worshiping her, driven mad. She's so perfect that no one even dares try to marry her. So she's kind of alone and hated and despised, Really makes me think of a lot of our modern pop princesses, that kind of duality of that fame that comes from beauty, where men love you and hate you. And it's just so vile and gross. But this is what's happening to poor Psyche. And it's not just men, it's also women, because it's Aphrodite who comes for her and curses her and says, we're going to make Psyche marry the most wretched of wretched beings. That is going to be her curse. Well, Cupid agrees to do this, and the family goes to the oracles, and the oracles tell them that they have to take their daughter Psyche and bring her up to the mountain to get married, and that she's going to get married to whatever monster comes, So they lead her up to the mountain and they leave her, they abandon her there on the mountain. And Cupid shows up. And Cupid originally was going to shoot an arrow at a monster or a horrible person, but he's so taken aback by the beauty of Psyche that he cuts himself and he falls in love with her. And that's sort of where we're at. All right, here we go. The Tale of Cupid and Psyche, the Palace. Oh, here we go. Psyche, pleasantly reclining in that grassy place on a bed of dew-wet grass, free of her mental perturbation, fell peacefully asleep. And when she was sufficiently refreshed by slumber, rose, feeling calm. She saw a grove planted with great, tall trees. She saw a glittering fount of crystal water. At the very center of the grove, beside the flowing stream, was a regal palace, not made by human hands, but built by divine art. You knew from the moment you entered you were viewing the splendid, shining residence of a god. There were coffered ceilings, exquisitely carved from ivory, and citron wood supported on golden pillars. The walls were covered with relief work in silver. Wild beasts and savage herds met your gaze as you reached the doorway. They were the work of some eminent master or demigod, or perhaps who, with the subtlety of great art, had made creatures all of silver. Even the floors were of mosaic, pictures patterned from precious stones, cut into tiny tiles. Blessed twice over or more are those who tread on shining jewels and gems. The length and breadth of the rest of the house was equally beyond price. The walls constructed of solid gold, gleaming with their own brilliance, so that even without the sun's rays, the house shone like day. The rooms, the colonnades, the very doorposts glowed, and every other feature matched the house in magnificence. So you would have thought rightly that this was a heavenly palace made for Jove to use on his visits to the world. Seduced by the attractions of this lovely place, Psyche moved closer and, gaining confidence, dared to cross the threshold. Now her desire to gaze on all these beautiful things led her to examine every object closely. On the far side of the palace, She found storerooms made with noble skill, heaped to the roof with mounds of treasure. All that existed was there, and beyond her amazement at the vast quantities of riches, she was especially startled to find not a lock or bolt or chain to defend this treasure house of all the world. As she looked around her in rapturous delight, a bodiless voice spoke to her. Lady, why are you so surprised at all this vast wealth? All that is here is yours. So retire to your room and ease your weariness on the bed, and when you wish, you can bathe. The voices you may hear are those of your servants, we who wait on you willingly, and when your body is refreshed, we will be ready with a feast. Psyche felt blessed by divine providence, and obeying the guidance of the disembodied voice, eased her weariness with sleep and then a bath. Nearby, she found a semicircular table, and judging from the dinner setting that it was meant for her, she promptly sat down to wait. Instantly, trays loaded with food and cups of nectar appeared, without a trace of servants. They were wafted and set before her as though by a breath of air. No one was visible, but words could be heard from somewhere. Her waiters were merely voices, and after a sumptuous meal, someone invisible came and sang, and someone played a lyre invisible too. And there came to her ears the interweaving melodies of some large throng, some invisible choir. So if we remember, she was carried off by that magical west wind Zephyr, right? And that was the last we saw of Psyche. And now it seems she's been brought to this mysterious gold palace. The tale of Cupid and Psyche, the mysterious husband. When these delights were ended, prompted by the sight of the evening star, Psyche retired to bed. Now, when night was well advanced, gentle whispers sounded in her ears, and all alone she feared for her virgin self, trembling and quivering, frightened most of what she knew nothing of. Her unknown husband had arrived and mounted the bed, and made Psyche his wife, departing swiftly before life fell. The servant voices waiting in her chamber cared for the new bride no longer virgin. Things transpired thus for many a night, and though constant habit as nature dictates, her new state accustomed her to its pleasures, and that sound of mysterious whispering consoled her solitude. Excuse me. Meanwhile, her father and mother, mourning and grieving ceaselessly, aged greatly. The story had spread far and wide, and her elder sisters, learning of all that had occurred, abandoned their own homes, sorrowing and lamenting, vied with each other in bringing solace to their parents. One night, Psyche's husband spoke to her, though she could not see him, knowing him nonetheless by touch and hearing. Sweetest Psyche, he said, my dear wife, cruel fortune threatens you with deadly danger, which I want you to guard against with utmost care. Your sisters think you dead, and troubled by this, they'll soon come to the cliff top. When they do, if you should chance to hear their lament, don't answer or even look in their direction, or you'll cause me the bitterest pain and bring utter ruin on yourself. Assenting, she promised to behave as her husband wished, but when he had vanished with the darkness, she spent the day weeping and grieving wretchedly, repeating again and again that she was truly dead, caged by the walls of her luxurious prison, bereft of human company and mortal speech, unable to tell her sisters not to mourn her, and worse, unable even to see them. She retired to bed once more with neither bath nor food nor any drink to restore her, and there she wept profusely. Soon her husband came to join her, earlier than was his wont, and finding her still crying, clasped her in his arms and scolded her. Is this what you promised me, dear Psyche? What can I expect or hope from you? Day and night you never stop tormenting yourself, even in the midst of our lovemaking. Do as you wish. Obey your heart's fatal demands, but remember my dire warning when, too late, you repent. But Psyche pleaded with him, threatening to die if he would not agree to her desire to see her sisters, speak with them, and ease her sorrows. So he acceded to his new bride's prayers, but also said she could give them whatever gold or jewelry she wished. but he warned her time and again, often with threats, never to yield if her sisters gave her bad advice or urged her to investigate his appearance. Otherwise, through curiosity, her act of sacrilege would hurl her from the heights of good fortune, and she would never enjoy his embraces more. She gave him thanks, and happier now cried, I'd rather die 100 times than be robbed of your sweet caresses. Whoever you are, I love you deeply and adore you as much as life itself. Not even Cupid could compare to you. But grant me this favor, I beg. Let your servant Zephyr waft my sisters here, just as he wafted me. And she began to offer alluring kisses, smother him with caressing words, and wrap him in her entwining limbs, adding to her charms with phrases like, my honey sweet dear husband, your Psyche's tender soul. He succumbed reluctantly to the strength and power of her seductive murmurs, promising to agree to everything, and then, as daylight drew near, vanished from his wife's embrace. The tale of Cupid and Psyche, the wicked sisters. Meanwhile, her sisters hurried to the crag where Psyche had been abandoned, and wept their eyes out, beating their breasts till the cliffs and rocks echoed with the sound of their loud wailing. Then they called their poor sister's name till Psyche came running from the palace, distraught and trembling at the sound of their melancholy voices descending the slope. Why tear yourselves apart with heart-wrenching grief, she cried. I, who you mourn, am here. Cease those sad sounds and dry your cheeks, drenched in tears. You can embrace the girl for whom you weep. Then she summoned Zephyr, reminding him of her husband's orders. He obeyed instantly, and her sisters were wafted down to her, safely riding the gentlest of breezes. They all delighted in eager embraces and mutual kisses, and the flow of tears that had been stemmed returned at joy's urging. Now enter my home in happiness, cried Psyche, and ease your troubled minds beside me. So she showed them the noble treasures of the golden house and called up the throng of attendant voices. They refreshed themselves, luxuriating in a fragrant bath and tasting the delicacies of an out of this world cuisine. And the result was that, overcome by fine abundance of truly heavenly riches, they began to nurture envy deep in their hearts. They started to question her endlessly, inquisitively, and intensively. Who owned these divine objects? What sort of man was her husband, and who on earth was he? But Psyche could not banish the thought of her secret promise and violate her pledge to her husband. So she pretended he was a young and handsome man with just the hint of a beard on his cheeks, who spent his days hunting over the fields and hillsides. But afraid of revealing something if the talk continued, and so betraying his trust, she heaped gold and jewelry in their hands, called there and then for Zephyr, and placed her sisters in his charge so he might return them. Oof. Once this was done, those delightful sisters were victims of envy's swelling bile and complained loudly to each other. "O blind, cruel, iniquitous fortune," cried one, "is it your pleasure that we, daughters with the very same parents, should suffer so different a fate? Are we the elder to live like exiles far from family, bound as slaves to foreign husbands, exiled from home and country, while she, the youngest, the last creation of our mother's exhausted womb, acquires such wealth and a god of a husband? Sister, do you see all those fine gems lying around that palace? Did you see those gleaming clothes and sparkling jewels and all that gold under our feet? Why, she'll not even know how to make use of it. If she keeps that handsome husband of hers, she'll be the luckiest woman in the world. And perhaps she hopes if their marriage endures and his affection increases, her divine husband will make her a goddess too. That's it. That's why she behaved and acted as she did. The girl's already gazing heavenwards, aspiring to deity, with invisible voices serving her, and she giving orders to the breeze. While look at poor me, with a husband older than father, as bald as a pumpkin, and as weak as a little child, who makes the house a prison with his bolts and chains." The other chirped in, As for mine, he's bent and bowed with arthritis, and scarcely ever pays homage to my charms. I'm forever massaging his twisted and frozen fingers, and soiling these delicate hands of mine with his odious fomentations, sordid bandages, and fetid poultices. Instead of playing the role of a normal wife, I'm burdened with playing his doctor. Decide for yourself, dear sister, with how much patience, and let me be frank, servility you'll endure this situation. But speaking for myself, I won't tolerate so delightful a fate descending on some undeserving a girl. On so undeserving a girl. Just think of the pride and arrogance she showed us, the haughtiness, the boastfulness of her immoderate display, the reluctance with which she threw us a few little trinkets from her caskets, and then, tired of our presence, quickly ordered us driven out, whistled off, and blown away. If there's a breath left in me as I'm a woman, I'll see her cast down from that pile of gold. And if you feel the sting of her insults too, as you should, let's devise a workable plan between us. Let's keep from our parents that she's alive and hide these things she gave us. It's enough that we two have seen all that we now regret seeing, let alone that we should bring glorious news of her to them in the world. There is no glory in unknown riches. She'll discover we're her elder sisters, not her servants. Now, let's return to our husbands, our plain but respectable homes, and once we've thought carefully about it, let's return in strength and punish her arrogance. Wow, that's so depressing. The tale of Cupid and Psyche, Cupid's warning. The wicked scheme greatly pleased the two wicked sisters. They hid all the costly gifts, and tearing their hair and lacerating their cheeks as they deserved to do, falsely renewed their lamentations. They soon frightened their parents into reopening the wound of their sorrow also, then swollen with venom. They hastened home to plan their crime against an innocent sister, even to murder. Meanwhile, her unseen husband, on his nightly visit, warned Psyche once more. See how much danger you're in. Fortune is plotting at a distance, but soon, unless you take firm precautions, she'll be attacking you face to face. Those treacherous she-wolves are working hard to execute some evil act against you by tempting you to examine my features. But do so, and as I've told you, you'll never see me again. So, if those foul harpies armed with their noxious thoughts return, as I know they will, you must hold no conversation with them. And if in your true innocence and tender-heartedness you can't bear that, then at least, if they speak of me, don't listen. Or if you must, don't answer. You see, our family will increase, and your womb, a child's, must bear another child, who, if you keep our secret silently, will be divine, though if you profane it, mortal. Psyche blossomed with joy at the news, hailing the solace of a divine child, exulting in the glory of the one to be born, and rejoicing in the name of mother. She counted the swelling days and the vanishing months, and as a beginner, knowing nothing of the burden she bore, was amazed at the growth of her seething wound from a tiny pinprick. But those foul and pestilential furies, her sisters, breathing viper's venom, were sailing towards her with impious speed. Now, for a second time, her husband warned Psyche in passing. The fatal day, the final peril, the malice of your sex and hostile blood have taken arms against you, struck camp, prepared for battle, and sounded the attack. Those wicked sisters of yours with drawn swords are at your throat. What disaster threatens, sweet Psyche? Take pity on yourself and me. With resolution and restraint, you can free your home and husband, yourself, and our child from imminent danger that threatens. Don't look at or listen to those evil women who, with their murderous hostility, their disregard of the bonds of blood, you should not call sisters, as they lean from the cliff top like sirens and make the rocks echo with that fatal singing. Her answer, almost lost in tearful sobbing, Psyche replied, Once before you asked for proof of my loyalty and discretion. Now too you will find me just as resolute. Give your servant Zephyr his orders one more. Let him perform his task. And if I am not to see your sacred face, grant me at least a glimpse of my sisters. By those cinnamon perfumed locks that adorn your head, by those softly rounded cheeks like my own, by your breast so warm, so wonderfully aflame, as I hope to find your looks in my unborn child's. At least, I beg you, yield to the loving prayers of a yearning suppliant, and allow me the pleasure of sisterly embraces. Fill your dedicated and devoted Psyche's spirit with joy once more. I'll ask no more regarding your appearance. Clasping you in my arms, not even the darkness of the night can hurt me now, my light. Bewitched by her words and her sweet caresses, her husband wiped away her tears with his hair and gave her his agreement, vanishing swiftly before the light of the newborn day. The tale of Cupid and Psyche, the sisters' scheme. Wedded together in conspiracy, her sisters landing at the nearest harbor and not even troubling to visit their parents, now hurried to the cliff, and with wild recklessness, not waiting for the attendant breeze, flung themselves into the air. Zephyr, mindful of his master's orders, caught them reluctantly in the folds of his ethereal robes and set them gently on the ground. Without a moment's hesitation, they marched into the palace, side by side, and with false affection embraced their victim, flattering her, masking the depths of their secret treachery with pleasing smiles. Dear Psyche, they said, no longer the girl you once were, a mother now. Think what a fine thing for us that burden of yours will prove. With what joy you'll fill our whole house. Oh, how lucky we will be to share in the care of that golden child. If it takes after its father as it ought, it will be a perfect little Cupid. With such simulated expressions of feeling, they gradually influenced their sister's mind. Once eased of their travel weariness by rest and refreshed by vaporous warm baths, they feasted well on fine rich foods and sweet meats. She ordered a lyre to play. It sounded. Flutes to pipe. They trilled. Choirs to perform and voices swelled. Those sounds with no visible musicians caressed the listeners' souls with the sweetest of melodies. By the wickedness of those vile women But the wickedness of those vile women was not lessened at all by those honeyed modulations. They turned the conversation according to their deceitful scheming, casually towards her husband. What kind of man he was, what his birth and background. In her thoughtless innocence, Psyche forgot her earlier inventions and composed a fresh fiction. She claimed he came from the neighboring province, a merchant responsible for extensive trade, middle-aged, with a dash of gray in his beard. Without prolonging the conversation, she heaped lavish gifts on them once again and sent them back by their airy vehicle. Once conveyed aloft on Zephyr's tranquil breath, they returned home talking spitefully. Well, sister, what do you say to that foolish girl's monstrous lies? First, he's a young man with a new growth of beard. Now he's middle-aged with a streak of gray in his hair. Who can change so suddenly from one age to another? The answer, my sister, is that she's making the whole thing up, or has no idea what her husband looks like. In either case, we must soon separate her from her riches. If she's truly ignorant of what he looks like, she must have married a god, and it's a divine child that womb of hers is carrying. Well, if she becomes the mother of a deity, and let's hope not, I'll tie the noose and hang myself. Meanwhile, back to our parents, and weave the threads of guile to match the pattern of our scheming. They greeted their parents haughtily, but irritated thus, they spent a troubled and wakeful night. Early in the morning, the wretched pair hastened to the cliff, and with the help of the breeze as usual, swooped downwards angrily, rubbing their eyelids to squeeze out a tear. They greeted the girl with cunning. There you sit, feeling blessed and happy in ignorance of your dire misfortune, careless of your danger, while we've been awake all night, unsleeping in our concern for your problems, sadly tormented by your impending disaster. We know the truth now, you see, and sharing, of course, in your ills and troubles, we cannot hide it from you. What sleeps beside you, shrouded by the darkness, is a monstrous serpent, a slippery knot of coils, its blood filled gaping jaws oozing noxious venom. Remember Apollo's oracle, which prophesied you were destined to wed some brutish creature. Hunters and farmers and others round about have seen the thing returning from its predations, swimming in the shallows of the nearby river. They say that he'll soon cease to nourish you with those delightful offerings in which he indulges, but once your pregnancy reaches full term and burdens you with its richest fruit, he'll devour you. You must decide about all of this. Will you listen to your sisters, both concerned for your safety, shun death, and live with us free from danger? Or do you prefer to end in the stomach of that savage beast? If you delight in the sounding solitude of this rural retreat of yours, the foul and perilous embrace of a clandestine love, the clasp of a venomous serpent, well, at least we loving sisters will have performed our duty. Then, poor little Poor little Psyche, naive and vulnerable, was seized with terror at their dark words. Beyond reason, she forgot all the warnings of her husband and her own pledge, and plunged headlong to ruin. Trembling and pale, the blood draining from her face, stammering thievish words through half-open lips, she answered as follows. Dear sisters, true and loyal as ever to your own, you are right. I believe those who told you all this speak no lie. Indeed, I have never seen my husband's face, nor do I know what he truly is. I only hear his midnight whispers, and suffer the attentions of an unseen partner who shuns the light. He must be some strange creature, I agree. He always warns me not to try and reveal his features, and threatens harsh punishment for my curiosity concerning his appearance. If you can save your sister from this danger, help me now. Neglect me, and you'll undo the good your care has brought about. Her defenses were down, and those wicked sisters, having breached the gates of her mind, now quitted the cover of their secret scheming, drew their blades, and bore down on the girl's helpless timidity. Said one, since our love of family compels us to shun all danger where a sister's life is at stake, we'll show you the only way to reach salvation. A carefully thought out plan. Take a sharp razor, wet it further, hide it in your palm, then place it secretly under the pillow where you lie. Then trim the lamp, fill it with oil so that it shines with a clear light, and conceal it under a little cover. Prepare all this with utmost caution, and after he's slithered into bed with you, as he's lying there enmeshed in the womb of sleep and breathing deeply, slip from the bed and tiptoeing barefoot without a sound, free the lamp from its dark prison. Seize the chance for a glorious deed of your own from the light's clear counsel, and grasping your double-bladed weapon tightly, raise your right hand, and with firmest stroke you can muster, sever the venomous serpent's head from his body. Our help will not be lacking. As soon as you've won freedom by his death, we'll be waiting anxiously to rush to your aid in carrying all the treasure back with us. We'll see you joined in proper marriage vows, mortal to mortal. With this inflaming speech, they kindled their sister's now heated mind further, then left her, fearing themselves to haunt the scene of so evil an act. They were wafted by the winged breeze to the summit of the cliff, as before, and hastening away in swift retreat, boarded their ship and were gone. Psyche was left alone, except that a woman driven by hostile furies is never alone. In her grief, she ebbed and flowed like the ocean tide, though the scheme was decided and she determined, still as she drove towards the act itself she wavered, confused in mind, torn by the countless conflicting emotions of the situation prompted. She prepared and delayed and dared and feared, despaired and felt anger, while, hardest of all to endure, she hated the beast and loved the husband embodied in a single form. Yet, as evening led towards night, she readied all needed for the wicked crime. With frantic haste, night fell and her husband came, and after love's skirmishes and struggles, he dropped into deep slumber. The tale of Cupid and Psyche. Revelation. Then Psyche, Though lacking strength and courage, was empowered by cruel fate, and unveiling the lamp, seized the razor, acting a man's part in her boldness. Yet, as the light shone clear and the bed's mysteries were revealed, she found her savage beast was the gentlest and cutest creature of all, the handsome god Cupid, handsome now in sleep. At the sight, even the lamp's flame quickened in joy, and the razor regretted its sacrilegious stroke. But Psyche, terrified at the marvelous vision, beside herself with fear and overcome with sudden weariness, sank pale, faint, and trembling to her knees. She tried to conceal the weapon in her own breast. She would indeed have done so if the gleaming blade had not flown from her reckless hand in horror at her dreadful intent. Exhausted now by the sense of release, she gazed again and again at the beauty of that celestial face, and her spirits revived. She saw the glorious tresses drenched with ambrosia on his golden brow, the neatly tied locks straying over his rosy cheeks and milk-white neck, some hanging delicately in front, others behind, and the splendor of their shining brilliance made the lamplight dim. Over the winged god's shoulders, white plumage glimmered like petals in the morning dew, and, though his wings were at rest, soft little feathers at their edges trembled restlessly in wanton play. The rest of his body was smooth and gleaming, such that Venus had no regrets at having borne such a child. At the foot of the bed lay his bow, and his quiver full of arrows, the graceful weapon of the powerful god. With insatiable curiosity, Psyche examined, touched, wondered at her husband's weapons. She drew an arrow from the quiver, testing the point against her thumb tip, but her hand was still trembling, and pressing too hard, she pricked the surface, so that tiny drops of crimson blood moistened the skin. Thus, without knowing it, Psyche fell further in love with love himself, so that now inflamed with desire for desire, she leaned over Cupid desperate for him. She covered him eagerly with passionate, impetuous kisses till she feared she might wake him. Then, as her wounded heart beat with the tremors of such bliss, the lamp, in wicked treachery, or malicious jealousy, or simply longing to touch and kiss in some fashion that wondrous body, shed a drop of hot oil from the depths of its flame onto the god's right shoulder. O bold and careless lamp, a poor servant to love, scorching the god of flame himself, though a lover it was who first invented you, as to enjoy, even at night, an endless sight of his beloved. Scalded like this, the god leapt up, and realizing his secret had been betrayed, flew swiftly and silently from his unhappy wife's kisses and embrace. Yet as he rose, Psyche clasped his right leg with both hands, a piteous impediment to his soaring flight, a trailing appendage, a dangling companion amongst the cloudy regions. At last she fell to the ground exhausted. As she lay there, her divine lover chose not to desert her, but flew her to a nearby cypress tree, from whose heights she spoke to her in distress. Poor innocent Psyche, he cried. Venus commanded me, though I have disobeyed my mother's orders, to fill you with passion for some vile wretch and sentence you to the meanest kind of marriage. But if I flew to you as your lover instead, it was a foolish thing to do. I see that, an illustrious archer though I am, I shot myself with my own arrow and made you my wife, and only for you to think me some savage monster and sever my head with a sword, a head that bears the very eyes that love you. I told you time and again to beware of this. I warned you over and over for your own good. As for those precious advisors of yours, I'll soon take my revenge for their pernicious machinations. You I punish merely by my flight. With this, he took wing and soared into the air. Wow. The tale of Cupid and Psyche, the sister's fate. Psyche lay there on the ground, watching her husband's passage till he was out of sight, tormenting herself with the saddest lamentations. But once he was lost to view, sped onwards into the distance by his beaten wings, she hurled herself from the margin of the nearest river. Yet the tender stream, respecting the god who can make even water burn, fearing for its own flow, quickly clasped her in its innocuous current and placed her on the soft tuft of its flowery bank. By chance, Pan, god of the wild, was seated on the shore, caressing Echo, the mountain goddess, teaching her to repeat tunes in 1,000 modes. By the river's edge, wandering she-goats grazed and frolicked, cropping the flowing grasses. The goat-legged god, catching sight of a sad and weary Psyche, and not unconscious of her plight, called to her gently and calmed her with the soothing words. Sweet lady, though I am only a rustic herdsman, I benefit from the experience of many a long year. If I surmise rightly, though wise men call it not surmise, but rather divination, by your weak and wandering footsteps, your deathly pale complexion, your constant sighs, and those sad eyes, you are suffering from love's extremes. But listen to what I say. Don't try to find death again by a suicidal leap or in some other way. Cease your mourning. End this sorrow. Rather pray to Cupid, greatest of the gods. Worship him and earn his favor through blandishments and deference. For he's a pleasure-seeking, tender-hearted youth. Psyche gave no reply to the shepherd god, but gave him reverences as he finished speaking and went her way. As she weirdly walked a good deal further, not knowing where she was, she came at twilight to a city where one of her brothers-in-law was king. Realizing this, Psyche asked that her arrival be communicated to her sister. She was quickly led to her, and when they were done with embraces and greetings, her sister asked the reason for her presence. Psyche explained. You'll recall your counsel when you both advised me to take a sharp razor and kill the monster that played the role of husband and slept with me, before its rapacious jaws might swallow me whole. Well, I acted on that advice, with the lamp my accomplice, but when I gazed on his face, I saw an utterly wonderful, a divine sight. Venus's child, the goddess's son, Cupid himself, I say, lying there and sleeping peacefully, roused by that beautiful vision, disturbed by excess of joy, distressed at being unable to delight in him much longer. Through dreadful mischance, a drop of hot oil spurted onto his shoulder. The pain roused him from sleep, and seeing that I was armed with flame and steel, he cried, For your wicked crime, you are banished from my bed. Take what is yours and go. I shall embrace your sister now. He spoke your name formally in holy matrimony. Then he ordered Zephyr to drive me from the palace. Psyche had barely finished speaking before her sister, spurred on by raging passion and venomous jealousy, had conceived a tale to deceive her husband. Pretending she had just had news of her parents' death, she took ship and traveled to the cliff edge, though an adverse wind was blowing. Filled with desire and in blind hope, she cried, Accept a wife worthy of you, Cupid. Carry your mistress to him, Zephyr. And she took a headlong leap. Yet even in death she could not reach her goal. Her body was broken and torn on the jagged rocks, as she deserved, and her lacerated corpse provided a ready banquet for the wild beasts and carrion birds. Nor was the second sister's punishment slow in arriving. Psyche wandered on to the city where her other sibling lived in similar style, who likewise, roused by her sister's story, eager to supplant her wickedly in marriage, rushed to the cliff and met the self-same end. Wow. The tale of Cupid and Psyche, Venus angered. Psyche wandered through the land seeking Cupid, while he lay in his mother's chamber groaning with pain from his scorched shoulder. Meanwhile, a snow-white bird, the seagull that skims the surface of the sea, dived swiftly beneath the ocean's waves, found Venus where she swam and bathed in the deep, and gave her the news that Cupid had been burned, was in the utmost pain from his wound, and lay there in doubtful health. Moreover, the rumors circling through the world by word of mouth had heaped reproach on her and gained her whole household a dreadful reputation. People said that they'd both abandoned their post, he to dally in the mountains, she to sport in the sea, that all delight, grace and charm was gone, that all was boorish, rough, unkempt, no nuptial rites, no friendly gatherings, no love of children, only a vast confusion and a squalid disregard for the chafing bonds of marriage. So that loquacious, meddlesome bird cackled on in Venus's ear, tearing her son to shreds before her eyes. Venus at once grew angry, crying. So now that fine son of mine has a girlfriend, has he? Come to tell me then, my only loving servant, the name of the creature that seduced a simple, innocent child. Is she one of the host of nymphs, or the troop of Horae, or the Muses' choir, or my own companions, the Graces? So, nymphs are those spirits that embody, mountains, trees, waters. The muses are also a type of nymph, but the muses are special. They are the goddesses of inspiration, and they are the children of the Titan Memnosine memory. The Horae are also nymphs, but they are special. They are the nymphs or goddesses of the seasons, and they change and wield power with the changing of the seasons. And then the Graces are also nymphs, but of a different kind as well. The Graces are the daughters of Aphrodite, and they're the charities, right? The ones who bring joy and goodness and bounty. Okay. The talkative bird's tongue ran on. Mistress, I'm not sure, but I heard he was desperately in love with a girl, Psyche by name, if I remember rightly. Now Venus screamed, loud with indignation. Psyche, that witch who steals my form, that pretender to my name, is she the one who delights him? Does the imp take me for some procuress who pointed that same girl out so he might know her? With this cry, she swiftly emerged from the sea and sought her golden chamber, where she found her son, indisposed as she had heard. She shouted from the doorway at the top of her voice, fine behavior, highly credible to your birth and reputation. First, you disregard your mother's orders, or rather your queen's, I should say, and fail to visit a sordid passion on the girl, then a mere boy, you couple with her, my enemy, and reckless, immature lovemaking, presumably thinking I'd love that woman I hate as a daughter-in-law. You presume you'll remain the only prince, unlovable, worthless rake that you are, and that I'm too old to conceive again? Well, know that I'll produce a better son than you. You'll feel the insult all the more when I adopt one of my slave boys and grant him your wings and torches, bow and arrows, and all the rest of the gear I gave you, which was never intended to be used this way. Remember, your father Vulcan makes no allowance from his estate for equipping you. So Vulcan, that's the god of the volcano and of fire. Hephaestus in the Greek, the great craftsman and the smith, right? You were badly brought up from infancy, quick to raise your hands and fire arrows at your elders in disrespect, and expose me, your mother, to shame each day. You monster! You often make me your target, sneer at me as the widow, without fearing your stepfather Mars, the world's strongest and mightiest warrior. Why would you, since you provide that adulterer with a ready supply of girls to torment me with? But I warn you, you'll be sorry for mocking me when that marriage of yours leaves a sour, bitter taste in your mouth. He was silent, but she went on complaining to herself. Oh, what shall I do? Where can I turn now everyone's laughing at me? Dare I ask for help with my enemy moderation, whom my son's very excesses so often offend? Yet I shudder at the thought of tackling that squalid old peasant woman. Oh, wow. What is moderation? Who is moderation in the Greek? Let's take a look here. Moderation, theoi. Okay. Sophrosine. Okay. A prophetic Oread nymph loved by Hermes, enemy of Aphrodite. Interesting. Okay. Whom my son's very excesses so often offend, yet I shudder at the thought. Oh, sorry, I read that. Where was this? And I'll spoil his looks with a harsher medicine still. I'll not consider my injuries atoned for till she shaved off her golden hair, which I brushed myself till it shone like gold, and clipped those wings of his, that I steeped in the steam of milky nectar from my breasts. With that she rushed out again, bitterly angry in a storm of passion. At that instant she met with Juno and Ceres, who, seeking her wrathful look, asked why that sullen form was marrying the loveliness of her bright eyes. So Juno, That's Hera, right? The wife of Zeus and the empress goddess. And then Ceres, that is Demeter, another one of these great mother goddesses, the goddess of the harvest and of grain, and the great mother of Persephone. Okay. All right. How opportune, she cried. My heart is ablaze, and here you come to do me a kindness. Exert your considerable powers. I beg to find my elusive runaway Psyche. I assume the widespread tale of my family, the exploits of that unspeakable son of mine, have not escaped you. Then they, aware of what had gone, tried to assuage Venus's savage anger. My dear, they said, what is this fault your son committed that you take so seriously? So much so you set out to thwart his pleasures, and seem so eager to ruin the girl he loves. What crime is it, we ask, if he likes to smile at a pretty girl? Don't you know he's young and male? Or have you forgotten his age? Just because he carries his years lightly, do you think him forever a child? You're a mother and a sensible woman besides. Stop spying so keenly on your son's pursuits, blaming his self-indulgence, scolding him for his love affairs. In short, finding fault with your own pleasures and talents in the shape of your handsome son. What god indeed, what mortal can endure your sowing the seeds of desire everywhere, yet constraining love bitterly where your own home is concerned, and shuttering the official workshop where woman's faults are made? Wow, that was awesome. So they obligingly provided the absent Cupid with a plausible defense. But Venus, offended that her wrongs were being ridiculed, turned her back on them and swept off towards the sea. The nymphs couldn't convince her. Seagulls didn't matter what they said. All right. And the other goddesses, right? Okay. Book 6, The Tale of Cupid, Psyche, Ceres, and Juno. So this is where we're going to end for today, and we will come back with more Tale of Cupid and Psyche. This has been fun. This has been great. I hope you guys have been enjoying this. Not too much Apuleius today. Apuleius is in the background listening to this beautiful story being told to that young girl who was abducted and this old woman in the cave. But this has been a lot of fun and a lot of wild magic on display with Aphrodite, Psyche, and Cupid. I'm really liking this. It's so much fun. And I can't wait to see what comes next, you know, because now we have the lovers split. They must reunite or it's not a great story, right? Okay. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Peace and love. Come and tune in tomorrow when we begin with Book 6. All right. Take care, everyone, and see you then.